Thank you. My name is Alice Lenahan, and I am Vice President of Women on the Wall. Now that Governor Abbott and the Texas legislature has passed and signed into law Senate Bill 11, HB 18, along with Senate Bill 504, the framework is in place for federal funding for programs in schools implementing social and emotional learning behavioral wraparound services. In my packet to you, I've included a testimony in opposition to those mental health bills because I believe that it is relative and that it's important for you to understand the pushback against social emotional learning from parents across Texas. I have a question for you. Do parents and our elected officials realize the psychological data collected along with the interventions and assessments by charter schools as well as public schools, but specifically these charter schools with ties outside the United States means that these people, whether their intention is good or bad, can use social, emotional, psychological data collected to modify Texas children's values, beliefs, and behaviors. Is that what Texas parents send our kids to school for? There's two documents that I encourage you to look at in your packet. The Pioneer Institute's report cautioning against social and emotional learning, along with the Royal Public Charter Schools, a comprehensive report of the Harmony Schools. And because the former CEO, Soner Tarem, was a part of Harmony and has now started the Royal Public Schools, I encourage you to read that document. And according to the Broad Center New Leaders Cohort, Soner Tarem is developing the Royal Public Charters as a national public charter school program. That's very important. As I have said and will continue to say, the fundamental shift in education today is away from an education of opportunity, equal opportunity based on academics, reading, writing, math, and history, to an education of equity, equal outcomes based on attitudes, values, beliefs, and behaviors. Do I have 30 seconds left? 30 minutes. Then the question becomes whose values, beliefs, and behaviors? When education is focused on how students perceive the world, this is known as critical theory or cultural Marxism. As noted in the Pioneer study, SEL will further erode the fundamental rights of parents to control the education and upbringing of their children due to an unjustified expansion of the schools beyond their basic mission of academics. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Cortez.
Thank you all for coming out. You know, as you all were talking and giving us your testimony, I appreciate some of the insight that you've shared. While I know my particular reasons for not supporting the charters out of committee, I do have a question for you, and just for clarification purposes. Did I understand that you don't support social and emotional learning? Is that what I understood?
It is correct, but I'd like to clarify something. I'm a product of Texas Public Schools. The social emotional learning that you received, that's what great teachers do. That we've always had great teachers who have pushed us, and I would call that social emotional learning. I support our public schools, our traditional public schools with locally elected school boards. I am in opposition to these charters because the difference between a charter school and a traditional public school is that local elected representation. If my child was at Austin ISD and I didn't agree or there was an issue, I could go to that school board. There's people I can go to. If we collapse, which I believe is the goal of all these public-private partnerships and school choice, if we collapse that system, that traditional public school system, we eliminate the ability for me to live in an area where my kids go to school based on our zip code, and I have a locally elected school board that I can work through.
So, just, I guess, to try to summarize what you said, and then I have a follow-up real quick. You don't believe that we should be approving any charter, period, right?
Correct.
Okay. And so I'm just curious, and again, I already know my reasons, but you said it in your statement. I just want clarification because you kind of put it out there for whoever's listening. You have a question here. It says, do parents and our elected officials realize the psychological data collected along with the interventions and assessments by these charter schools with ties to outside of the U.S. states? Outside of the United States means these people, whether their intentions are good or bad. What does that mean? What does that mean to you?
Well, when we set up our statewide longitudinal database system, that system was in place to collect academic data to make sure that we were not leaving any child behind. With the push for social emotional learning as a program and for assessments to shift to the formative, where it's not summative, end of course, 2 plus 2 is 4. When they're formative, that's more of a surveillance. That's more
What
of a
about the part where you
monitoring.
put these people? What does that mean?
When you have outside entities who have access to that psychological data on Texas children, and we know that the FERPA law was gutted in 2012. The law wasn't changed, the rules and regulations were changed to say that our children's private data can be collected without consent in the name of research. That opens the door for any third-party entity to have access to that data, that psychological data. And what we know as well is that that Congress passed FEPA, the Foundations for Evidence-Based Policymaking, in 2019, which makes legal the interoperability of all of these agency databases. As a parent, for my child's data to be out there in...
Are you referring to the third party as federal government?
Well, when there's public-private partnerships, I see a real issue with that.
I guess my follow-up to staff would be, to what extent is this information accurate, Debbie or Heather? I'm just curious. I've never heard this. And we can share information with a third party.
I'm not.
Are any of you aware of this? Is there something?
I am aware of some of it. I'm not as well versed as our panel seems to be, but I am aware of. Certainly, I think the data is mass in terms of shared data for research purposes, and that is the extent of what I have read.
I think we have to ask Vaughn or Chris, and they're not here.
Can I add to that? The other federal law that impacts this is WIOA, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, which basically binds education under the Department of Labor, Department of Health and Human Services, Department of Defense, and Department of Education. And I can send you these documents for verification and to look into it. I encourage you to. In the WIOA documents, it says that it needs to be drilled down to the individual level. That to me means there is a national database on students from womb to tomb, from pre-K through the workforce. And that data will follow that child for the rest of their lives. To me, that's very concerning, and when there's third-party entities like Royal Charter Harmony, that data is open, in my opinion.
And is that true of any ISD currently?
Yes, and that's one of the reasons why, and if you'll look in the testimony against Senate Bill 10, and I'll tell
Yeah,
you,
you mentioned that, that's all, I'm just asking.
there's also a letter, I'll email it to you, I didn't print one for everyone, but there was a coalition letter of 130 separate organizations across Texas in opposition to Senate Bill 10 and Senate Bill 11 and all of these wraparound services. And in that letter, cautions about the data collection and the fact that it goes beyond people who are working in a school district that know and care and love that child. When this type of data is out there, we need to, I think it's your responsibility to be.
So you're saying it applies to all schools specifically? All right, I think Ms. Perez-Diaz has a question.
Debbie had a,
Oh,
I just wanted to caution you that we're going a little far afield
Right.
from
Yeah.
your post.
we are, yeah. So let's get back to the charter applications and questions for our testifiers.
I'll find a way I promise this will circle back around to what we're speaking about. I just want to state, having worked in child welfare, having understood and seen a lot of children who need support, I think that there's it seems that there's a huge misunderstanding about the difference between SEL and social work and mental health supports. When you have mental health support, when you have social work, that's when data is collected. Social emotional learning is very different. There are huge distinctions about that, and I think that it matters in terms of training, and that's a critical piece in any public education institution. So there's that really needs to be stated, because I think that what was just being said is completely inaccurate. And I think
to your point, that's why having a third party like Royal Public Schools that's not held accountable to a locally elected school board, in my opinion, is an even more dangerous path. If they're going to get into that business of those type of wraparound services.
And I think so. What I will say is, any school that's educating a child really needs to understand all of the students that are in their classrooms. And I think that that's a critical piece in terms of when we're talking about how we engage around the community and how we engage with our families. So I wanted to, I think I don't have a question, I just wanted to make the distinction very, very clear that there is a difference between social emotional learning, social work, and mental health counseling and support.
So in the long-range plan for public education approved in November, the State Board of Education is recommending that the state supports what we call an MTSS, and that is a multi-tiered system of support for all students. The SBOE recommendation states, TA and the legislature financially incentivize an integrated and data-driven academic and non-academic multi-tiered system of support on every campus to identify and connect all students with appropriate support services, including supports for behavioral health, mental health, and intrapersonal effectiveness. The other part of it is that TA and the legislature financially incentivize an integrated workflow management system to enable the identification of students needing support, increase the effectiveness of school counselors, which also aligns with the governor's school safety plan regarding freeing up counselors and adding more resources to counselors, and monitor and evaluate the effectiveness of support services. So there are two parts to this recommendation. The what, which seeks to endorse a framework to support all children comprehensively through the multi-tiered system of support. And the second part is the how, which seeks to emphasize that in order for successful adoption of MTSS, for a workflow management system that has the goal of systemizing support, tying indicators such as academics, behavior, attendance with support providers in a dashboard-like system. So what is MTSS? Some of you might ask. In describing it, I'm going to lean on the work of a nonprofit called Understood, along with the American Institute for Research. It's a framework that helps districts improve the performance of all students by identifying needs early on, modifying academic and non-academic interventions quickly. It's a comprehensive system that screens all students and provides interventions that can be intensified if needed. It's real-time support, not wait to fail. At Pro Unitas, we kind of lean on, it helps identify, connect, monitor. The word MTSS is often used interchangeably with, frameworks that you're familiar with, such as response to intervention, which is more academic focused, or PBIS, positive behavior support, which is more behavior. MTSS bridges the silos and brings these systems together. In other words, MTSS is not just help with academics, but also integrates the behavioral, the social, emotional, and interpersonal aspects.